Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, with you for another episode of the Steelers Preview. That's right, we're previewing nothing. There's nothing going on. There's no mini camp OTAs, but we're back and we're talking Steelers stuff. You know, this is the time of the year where if I turn on the radio, if it's sports talk radio, you hear them talking about NBA free agency, snooze fest, Wimbledon, don't care, Women's World Cup, over with. It's just waiting, or we're just biding our time. I think tomorrow will be, 14 days or so until the players report. We're around 2 weeks out. So with that, let's introduce Bryan Anthony Davis. How's it going, Bryan?
You know what? I'm a little hungover from cake and celebrating because it is Antonio Brown's 31st birthday. And, I've been celebrating it all day. I hope I can give you a good show. I'm going to do my best. But happy birthday to Antonio Brown. And I try to get these guys off camera. I try to get them to agree to sing and wear party hats, and they wouldn't do it. So I'm a little disappointed. Maybe if we could raise enough money in the super chat, we could get Jeff to wear a party hat. I think that would be really fun.
Well, welcome to the wrong side of 30, Antonio Brown. Dave Schofield is back from his Pina Colada extravaganza. How's it going, Dave?
I did not have a single Pina Colada. I have to admit, but no, I am back. I am really glad to be back with you guys, get back into the swing of things. That whole little downtime after vacation is like, what am I going to do? So it's nice to get back and do this. I know Jeff's going to be feeling that in a couple weeks, but
nah, I really won't be feeling that. But anyways, Dave, I have a question for you. Yeah, I don't know if you drink or not, but if you do partake, what is your beverage of choice?
This is going to be disappointing because I know one time in the live chat, people put their money on me in the drinking contest, and I don't really drink. It's been several years probably, and it's not because I go out of my way to not. It's just not a priority in my life.
Okay, so you go to a bar, you're getting a drink, you order what?
Probably water, because I always drive.
Oh my gosh, Dave, you're ordering an alcoholic beverage. What are you ordering?
You've got an Uber, Dave.
I don't know that I've ever drank at a bar. The only time I think I ever drank was
oh my gosh, how are you making it so
honestly, because you're going to make fun of me. Honestly, it would be a Red's Apple Ale.
A Red's, all right. It's an answer. I'm so happy because it's an answer. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
People don't drink and drive. I am really big against that. I won't go anywhere and even take a sip of something if I know I'm driving. I will always offer to drive with everybody. That's just something I'm really convicted about in my life, and I wish that everyone was, because I don't like to see lives destroyed. Now that we can get away from the seriousness of this, let's go back and goof around. Bryan, why didn't you tell us about your birthday presents you got for Antonio Brown's birthday?
Well, I tell you what, your whole spiel there, and which I respect, but it was like one of NBC's The More You Know. I expected a rainbow and a unicorn to come up there, like you and David Schwimmer talking. Like, hey, folks, remember, take an Uber.
Healthy decisions.
I've wow, I don't even know where to go from that. Jeff mentions Pina Colada. I want to sing Rupert Holmes from 1979.
Yes. Very good.
Which is a very bizarre song because they're celebrating the fact that they're both cheating on each other, really, if you listen to the lyrics. But everybody loves the song.
It's an emotional affair, though. It's not physical.
All right, yeah. I would like to see anybody try to explain that one. It was just an emotional affair, baby. I swear.
Who's gonna put an ad in the paper saying that they like that?
Pina Coladas making love in the rain.
Before we get started with the title of the show, Bryan, you did receive a birthday gift. It wasn't from Antonio Brown that it had. I'd like you to tell the listeners about the gift that you received today.
So a long time ago, I'd say about 10, 12 years ago, I decided to start getting 8x10s of Steelers and sending them in the mail to the team, self-addressed envelope with the picture, and I would get them back. have about a 65 to 70% return rate. Over the years, I've gotten Jerome Bettis, Ben Roethlisberger, Terry Bradshaw, Hines Ward, a lot of different Steelers. Mike Tomlin actually takes about 2 weeks to get back to you. Personalized are really nice. So in 2010, I put a bunch in. And one of them went out to one of my favorite all-time Steeler punters, Josh Miller, and came home 9 years later in the mail today. To Bryan, all the best. So I'm loving it. Hey, the guy took the time to send it back. I'm thrilled. I mean, this one, Jeff, you've seen my wall in the basement. I rotate them out. I probably have close to about 250 now of Steelers, and I've a couple others like Magnum PI sent me one. Tom Selleck, who's my all-time favorite. He should have been a Steeler. That's how cool he is. But with that being said, Josh, thank you. It's not the fact that I had to wait long. It's just the fact that you sent it, and I will cherish this. I appreciate it.
Is it normal for regular fans to have a favorite punter? I don't think I have a favorite punter. You just said he was one of my favorite Steelers punters. I'm thinking to myself, is it Jeremy Kapanos? Is that your second favorite?
No, you know what? I would probably have to go with Craig Colquitt.
Okay.
But I'm liking me some Harry Newsome from back in the day, back in the 80s too.
Dave, who's your favorite punter? If you say Jordan Berry, I'm kicking you off the show.
No,
right now.
I'm not. I'm actually going to tell you that what year was that when the Steelers played in Washington on not the Monday night to start the season, but it was a Monday night in November.
That was right before election.
10 years ago.
Yeah, right before election.
Yeah, the night before Obama.
And no joke, a guy 4 or 5 rows in front of me was wearing a Sepulveda jersey. I'm like, to buy a jersey of a punter, man, that's some dedication. But I do not have a favorite Steelers punter. Give me an average over 50, and you can get on the list.
Okay. All right. So enough of the shenanigans. Let's get down to brass tacks, as they say. And the way we've titled this episode is going back and taking a look at who is drafted better from the year 2000 to present day, the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New England Patriots. There's a lot of reasons we chose the year 2000, but before we get into that, I want to throw it to Brian Davis because he was the one that kind of brought this up on his show, The Steelers Hangover. I'm going to let him elaborate, and he's going to throw it to Dave. He's going to give us all the stats and the breakdown. So, Brian, go ahead.
Tony Defio and I were talking on Monday on the show about how we have friends who are convinced that the Steelers are horrible drafters. They're because they don't realize that if you get 2 to 3 quality players out of a draft, that's actually a great draft. And so we were talking about it, and we were talking about if you look back, and everybody talks about how Belichick is all-time great drafter, and if you look at it, he's had a lot of busts over the years, probably more first-round busts. Probably a lot of players that have not stuck. So we figured that Dave, who is our stat extraordinaire, and I tell you what, I gave Dave a lot of props. I think he was surprised, and I think there was a tear in his eye as he was listening to it. But I figured it would be a great challenge to see if Dave could figure out for us who is actually statistically a better drafter since the Belichick-Brady era in 2000, and that's when Kevin Colbert came to the team as well. So that would be a perfect comparison. So with that being said, my money's still on the Steelers because I think the Steelers have a very good draft history over the last 20-some years, but I could be wrong.
All right, Dave. The Oracle, as Lance calls him. Dave,
I'm the Oracle of all Steelers knowledge. I'm just the one who won't give up until I find an answer. That's really all it is.
So what do you have for us?
Well, like you said, I started in 2000. I didn't even check with you guys. I just started that date myself because I thought Kevin Colbert, Tom Brady was drafted in 2000. That's a good starting point for both teams. So it really comes down to what you deem as successful. So I looked up 5 different categories. I did it for all players drafted by the Steelers and Patriots since 2000, and I did it for just the first round. And the 5 categories are how many first team All Pros they had, how many Pro Bowlers they had, how many players were considered a starter for the season. That's one breakdown that they have on Pro Football Reference. How many games they started and how many games they played. So I did a breakdown of those. What of those do you guys think would probably be the better gauge as to whether or not they drafted better?
I would say starter. If you have a
That's where I'm
consistent
leaning.
starter, but a starter that stays with the team. I'm not
Well, yeah, because
that sticks.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that I did not break it down to, because that was going to get really, really in depth, and that's something I could look into more. Part of me almost doesn't want to hold it against the Steelers if they sign a player that's a good player and that player chooses to leave and go on and play somewhere else. Obviously, the Steelers drafted a good player. He just didn't. The fact that that player moved on doesn't mean that they weren't a good player that was drafted. So pretty much what I looked at was players' career numbers, whether it was with the team that drafted them or not. Now, I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
You know what? I can agree with that. One footnote, and one of the things we brought up on the Hangover, something that the Patriots are so very good at, are getting players from other teams early in their career, cast-offs like Kyle Van Noy, the linebacker who was a second-round pick of the Lions. So I'm saying that a lot of their success comes with acquisitions after the fact.
Yes, that's true.
So that's why we're looking completely at drafting and staying.
Well, let's say, for example, it's pre-2000, but how would you judge Mike Vrabel? Mike Vrabel got a lot of his career statistics with the Patriots, but technically he was drafted by the Steelers.
3 years, yeah.
Yeah. So the way I broke it down, all those statistics, now, like I say, he doesn't count in this case, would have counted towards a player. I'm looking at players drafted by the Steelers and drafted by the Patriots and their NFL careers. So that's basically the best way to break it down, because if not, it was going to get really, really complex into that. But if you want to look at starting, let's look at the 2 different categories. One of them was the player considered a starter for the season, meaning that they started more games than anybody else at their position for the season. Pittsburgh has had 161 draft picks since 2000. That includes 2019. And New England has had 176. So they have obviously 15 more picks. The Steelers have 3 players who were considered starters 10 years or more. They had 10 seasons or more where they're considered starters. The Patriots had 6. Okay. But the Steelers had more players that ended up being starters. They had 65 versus the Patriots 62. So once again, there's not a big discrepancy there, but some. If you look at games started, the Steelers have drafted 17 players that have 100 or more games started in the NFL. The Patriots have drafted 15 players that have had 100 or more games started in the NFL. If you look at games, let's say just games played, and I looked at players that were hitting that 100 game mark. So that means recent drafts, you can't really count them too much, because a lot of those guys, I'm pretty sure TJ Watt's going to be a pretty good player, but he just doesn't have the years in to say that he's going to have the long NFL career. The Steelers had 28 players that had 100 or more games played. The Patriots had 30. So you say all the Patriots had more, but technically the Steelers had a higher percentage when it comes to that. So when it comes to these stats like that, they're almost neck and neck for the most part. Jeff looks like he really wants to say something about that.
No, I'm good. I'm just listening to all the stats and taking them on. It's very subjective.
Yeah, exactly. Like just to throw out the other stuff that I have, New England has had more more first-team All-Pro players. They've had 11. They've drafted 11 players that have ended up first-team All-Pro, and the Steelers have drafted 6, although they're not, New England has 19 times they've had an All-Pro versus 15 times for the Steelers because, of multiple ones. So that's one thing that New England does have more All-Pro players, but you got to remember, All-Pro is really tough. Ben Roethlisberger is not an All-Pro player. He's never made first-team All-Pro. But when it comes to Pro Bowl, the Steelers have more Pro Bowl players. They've drafted 21 Pro Bowl players, while New England has drafted 17. So as you can see, it's kind of back and forth. What I found interesting was when you look at the first round. New England has had 18 first-round draft picks since 2000, and Pittsburgh has had 20. So, because New England's traded out of there some. So, what's interesting is how many of those players have been a starter in the NFL? How many of the Steelers' first-round draft picks of the 20 of them do you think have been starters in the NFL?
I would probably say 19, with the exception of Jarvis Jones, if he was not considered a starter, because if you're looking from the beginning of like 2000, because you're looking at Plexico, you're looking at Casey Hampton, Kendall Simmons, so Polamalu, Roethlisberger, Heath Miller, Santonio Holmes. So you probably have a majority of starters there.
Do you agree, Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with that number. I was going to say the same.
Well, it's 19, but it's not Jarvis Jones. It's Devin Bush, because he hasn't had a chance to start yet. No, seriously.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is including last year's first rounder, there you go. Terrell Edmonds has already been, after his rookie year, is considered a starter. So they've had 19 out of their 20, with basically every player that's been eligible to be considered a starter ended up being a starter. But New England only has 14 of their 18. They have 4 first-round draft picks that were never starters. Now, one of which obviously is this year's. Bryan's receiver that he liked that they drafted was it N'Keal?
N'Keal Harry.
Yep. So obviously it's him. Their first-round draft pick last year ended up on the IR. That was an offensive tackle, I do believe.
Isaiah Wynn from Georgia.
That is correct. But some of their players that were never considered starters. Wait a second, that's Pro Bowls. What am I doing? Hold on, I lost it. Technology, gotta love it. Lawrence Maroney and Dominique Easley were 2 players that they drafted in the first round that technically have never been a starter in the NFL. And those weren't recent ones. Maroney was in 2006 and Easley was in 2014. So they've had a little bit more misses with some players and stuff when it comes to the first round. The Steelers they're pretty much even in All-Pro when it comes to first-round picks. The Steelers have had 4, 9 times. The Patriots have had 5, 7 times. The Steelers had more Pro Bowl players and a lot more times, 10 players 38 times versus 8 players 28 times. And then the whole thing with the starters. And then the Steelers, they're just about even when it comes to like games started and games played. So really, the answer is it's almost too close to call. And if everyone thinks that New England is a genius at drafting and the Steelers are terrible, that's not a good narrative. If anything, they're both pretty decent.
Well, if I can say something here, to me, like I said earlier, it's very subjective. And you can talk about stats and Pro Bowls and All Pros and all this stuff. I go by the eye test. And for some reason, when I think of the Patriots, I think about what Bryan said earlier, that they don't necessarily always draft the best players. They're able to find players that they want to fit their scheme. And it could be a cast off from somewhere else. It could be in free agency, like Wes Welker from Miami. Trades, they'll make trades from time to time. I just feel that Belichick is a tremendous coach, and he knows exactly what he wants and what he needs. So I'll take the Steelers in terms of drafting, but at the same time, Belichick's genius, if you want to call him that, goes well beyond that, in my opinion. Bryan, what do you think?
I agree completely on that. So hearing this entire thing, and great job, Dave, but I don't think your job's done because now we need to see where the Steelers and Patriots rank against the other 30 teams in the league. So you've got work to do, buddy.
Yeah, that's going to take a little bit of time.
He'll get that to us next year. So okay, those are some great numbers, and we know Dave loves numbers, and that's going to lead us into the next Stat Geek segment, which is what this week, Dave?
Well, it's basically looking at really what we expect for the season next year. We talked about it a little bit. I'm going back to an over under. This was the over under I kind of wanted to finish up on. I know we probably could have done it the first day of training camp, but we'd rather talk about that. And since Jeff isn't going to be with us next week, I wanted to ask this. It's overall offensive and defensive ranks for the year. And I've done this based on stuff over the last 5 years is how I came up with the numbers. Now I weighted it to where more recently is weighted heavier. But just so you know, when they say a team is ranked, fifth overall in offense, what are they generally looking at? Do you guys have any idea?
Total yards.
Yes, it's total yards is generally the stat that they look at. So offensively, total yards gained, defensively, given up. Now they also usually throw in right next with it is points scored. Now the reason those two things don't always equate, and it's real interesting when it comes to the Steelers. Like for example, on defense, the Steelers yardage wise, they were the sixth best defense last season, but points wise, they were 16th. Any idea why there's such a big discrepancy there? Is because of the massive minus in turnover ratio that you get from the turnover margin that you get from that. So when you don't generate a lot of takeaways and you have a lot of turnovers, generally you can not give up a lot of yards, but at the same time you could be giving up a lot of points because teams are getting the ball in good field position at times, and you're not ever taking it away from them. But here's what we got. Let's look at the offense first. In 2018, let's just look at we'll look at yards then points. The Steelers were ranked fourth in yards, sixth in points. 2017, they were third in yards, eighth in points. 16, it was seventh in yards, 10th in points. 15 was third in yards, fourth in points. In 2014, they were second in yards and seventh in points. So they were in the top 7 in the last 5 years. The worst they were was seventh in yards and 10th in points, and that was 2016. So I'm going to give you an over and under. Now, to find over and under is tough because technically higher is lower when when it comes to ranking. So as you're talking higher and lower. So I'm going to give you for yards, and I'm giving you a hook for all of these. So it's going to be and a half. So that way you don't have to worry about the push. So for yards, I have a rank for 2019. Will the Steelers finish better than 4.5? So if you say you take the over, you're saying they're going to finish higher, meaning the lower number, like first, second, third, or fourth.
I'll take the I'll say that they're going to be lower than I'm confused on the whole system, so I'm going to say lower. But if I could make a comment on that before I do that, Pittsburgh was ranked, if I'm not mistaken, 31st in rushing yards last year, and that was not a bad rushing team. It was the fact that James Conner was getting, when he was in there, he was getting towards the end 15 carries per game. He was lucky to get 15 carries. There was no focus on the running game, but as far as yards per carry, they were a lot better. So I think yards per carry, yards per catch, is probably a little more important in trying to figure this whole thing out. I still think they're going to lose a little bit as far as yardage. Not too much. So I'll say I still think they're a top 10 offense.
But you don't think they're going to be in the top 4?
Nope, I do not.
Okay. So that's technically would be an under.
So if hidden, okay, I'll take over. I think though, I think fourth would be appropriate. You said 4.5, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll take the over there, And I just think that this team, this offense behind this line is going to be balanced more. And I'm not so much saying balance in terms of run versus pass, but also just moving the ball with efficiency, taking what the defense gives. I think this is going to be a good offense. So that's why I'll take the over. What's next?
Okay, and just so you know, I took the under as well. So then we have points. Will they, because they don't all generally finish as high in points, will they, at the number there is 7.5. So the over or the under. So if you're taking under, you're saying they'll finish 7th or better. Sorry, if you're taking the over, you're saying they'll finish 7th or better. And if it's under, they will finish 8th or worse.
I'll actually go the over.
Okay.
I feel like they could be top 5 in points.
And Jeff?
I'm actually going to take the under here and say that I think they're a team that's going to move the ball well, but they might struggle in the red zone and converting those opportunities to touchdowns. So points might go down a little bit. So I'm going to take the under.
That's very interesting. So Bryan thinks they're going to be better at points and worse in yards, and Jeff thinks the opposite. I have them being under, meaning that I don't think I'm not saying they're going to be a bad offense. I just think it might not quite be what it's been the last several years. So skipping over to the defense, this is where it gets tricky because the defense, let's just look at yards. The last 5 years, they were 6th, 5th, 12th, 21st, and 18th. So taking that into consideration, I have them for defense, overall defense for yards. I have it set at 9.5 based on those 5 years and then weighting it the way that I did. So for the defense wise, yards wise, do you think they'll be 9th or better?
I abstain. And the reason I abstain because I don't care. I care about points per game. I care about wins and losses in this situation. What you said earlier, Dave, about the turn. I care about turnover ratio. So the yards. I mean, it doesn't matter when we're talking about a top 10 defense that is losing games because they can't get off the field in the last 2 minutes of the game. That stat is worthless to me.
Gotcha. So overall defense doesn't do it for you.
Nope.
Yep.
But
Alrighty.
if you want me to answer, I will. I'll just say under.
Okay.
Over something.
What do you think, Jeff?
What was the number set again? 9.5?
9.5. So in other words, will there be a top 9 defense when it comes to
I think they will be I think they'll be above that. I think this defense is going to be a lot better than people think. And I think that in the past, I remember, gosh, it was the year that Debo came back. I remember they were awful in terms of yards, but they had a very good red zone defense, and they kept people off the board. I think they're going to be an all-around better group, so I'll say that they're better, so that is over.
That's the over. Okay. I took the over as well. I think that, like I say, last year they were technically 6th in yards, but that's not always a true, like Bryan says, that's not a true indication of what they're doing. Like, for example, when in 2015, when they were 21st in yards, they were the 21st best defense. They were 11th in points. So this past year, they were 6th in yards and 16th in points. So back in 2015, when they were so terrible with yardage, they were still better in points than what they were last year. So let's do the points one real quick here. Bryan might actually care about this one. I have them at 11.5. Because they went 16th, 7th, 10th, 11th, and 18th over the last 5 years. So I have them at 11.5. So basically, you're going to take the over if you think they'll be in the top 10.
Then I will take the over because I agree with Jeff. I think this is going to be a better defense with more stops. I think more field goals than trips inside the touchdown zone. So if that's even a term, touchdown zone. The end zone. Like, oh my gosh, it's tired. I'm tired.
Geez.
You have me late.
That sound you hear is all credibility just leaving the show.
It's been a long day.
All right, what do you got, Jeff?
I'm going to take the over. I think they're going to be a better defense, and they're going to keep them out of the touchdown zone.
Oh my gosh, I'm so ashamed.
To try to bring it back, I said over as well. So that's the way I'm looking at with this team this year. I think the defense is going to be a little bit better than expected, and the offense won't have to be quite as good. Jeff can't stop laughing over the touchdown zone.
Bristol ain't calling me, I'll tell you that.
I'm trying to keep us going here, but
that's something
all
my
we have. I
eight,
wanted to
that's
see
something my
how we were.
8-year-old that's something my 8-year-old daughter will say. Yeah, they got in the touchdown zone.
It's my wife rubbing off on me. She calls the kickoff the cool runny up thing. So
Cool runny up thing. Oh man, I thought I had it bad in my house. It's actually pretty good.
that's just a fried brain, boys. I'm telling you that I'm tired.
The touchdown zone. All right, so Jeff, you want to go ahead and move this touchdown zone
we'll
celebration a little along?
Yeah. After that, let's just do some questions. If you're in the live chat right now, and if you didn't know that let's say you just stumbled on the show and you found it in podcast platform, we actually do have a YouTube feed. You can find us on YouTube by going to youtube.com and search BTSD Steelers Radio. And we have the live chat, which is a interactive group chat feature that runs live during the show. And so a lot of people check in all the time and they comment. It's a little community we have going on here, and we'll do some question and answer stuff, especially in the off season. So if you have a question, fire away. If you want to use the super chat feature with Bryan referenced earlier in the show, you can by typing in your question, and on the right you have a little money sign, and there you can put in any amount of money into what we call the tip jar, and it'll highlight your question. We'll guarantee to answer it. You don't have to use it, but you can. So since we don't have any questions just yet, there's a lot of people in there, but they haven't asked questions yet. I'll go ahead and start this thing off. Antonio Brown did an interview. I'm sorry, Hines Ward did an interview with I think it was 24/7 Steelers 24/7, the CBS affiliate, and talked about how he still bleeds black and gold, yada yada yada, and he was comparing himself to Antonio Brown. This is interesting to me. Obviously, because of the way that people feel about Antonio Brown and the way he left, they're never going to compare him to Hines Ward because Hines Ward's one of the beloved sons of Pittsburgh Steelers lore. But from a production standpoint, where do you rank the two in terms of the best Steelers wide receivers, Bryan?
Well, I've got to be unpopular here and go Antonio Brown. I mean, that he is one of those players that, I mean, he did not bring the rings to Pittsburgh like Hines Ward helped to. However, as far as one of the greatest wide receivers of all time, you're probably looking at a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's doing things that only Jerry Rice did at the pace that it's just unprecedented what he's doing. I was looking at the numbers recently for an article that I'm working on. It's about Steelers and breaking records, team records. Now, he's off the team, but I was looking at last year's, and he was so close at the end of this year to overtaking Hines Ward in those Hines has 1,000 catches. He was about to overtake him in that probably next year. In 2 years, he would have owned every record if he stayed a Steeler. I just think that he was able to change a game quicker than anybody we've ever seen on the Steelers. That includes Swan, Stallworth, Lewis Lips, and Hines Ward. So I'm going Antonio Brown.
What about you, Dave?
I'm going with the unpopular opinion as well with Bryan that Antonio Brown definitely from the statistics standpoint has been the more dynamic player. But I really like basically what Hines Ward was saying is I didn't put my statistics above what we needed to do to be successful in the field. And that's something you have to take into consideration because the reason AB had his statistics, you find out more and more, is because he demanded his statistics, win, lose, or draw. Hines Ward was not that way. He was the team player. I mean, you're not saying he was ever bad at it, but you're not going to see Antonio Brown put his health on the line like Hines Ward would in blocking downfield. So when you want to look at it purely statistics, you have to say Antonio Brown. But when you're talking about the better Steeler, it's hard to go up more than Hines Ward.
Yeah, that's a tough debate, and I see both sides of the fence. I just, yeah, it's tough. The better receiver is Antonio Brown, but the better Steeler, I think we all agree, is Hines Ward. Now, Crazy Chris, he puts $5 into the tip jar. He says, I have a question you all could answer. Will Devin Bush win Rookie of the Year? Or will the Steelers' other defensive stars outshine Bush's chance to win? Meaning, will he basically not have the opportunity that other rookies will based on the fact that the Steelers' defense might be performing well and he won't have a chance? Brian, what are your thoughts?
Are we talking Joe Green Great Performance Award
No, I
for
think
the
he's talking
team? Or are we talking,
NFL award.
that's I think defensive rookie of the year. Yeah, I think he has a great chance as anyone in the league. The Steelers do have a very good rookie class here. But I think he would headline it, and if they do well, he is one of those players that's looked upon to probably be a favorite for it.
Okay, what about you, Dave?
Well, he's definitely, unless there's always something with injury. I think he's the front runner to win it for the Steelers. But I think this is he's got a good chance to get it for the league, because I think he's going to see a lot of action. So I think his name will be in the mix at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. It'll come down to stats and whether he puts up enough stats at inside linebacker. You have to ask him, will he have the sacks? Will he have any interceptions, pass defenses? But I think he'll be there in the mix for sure. All right, let's do a couple rapid fire questions here. Thomas asks, what player would you expect to see traded at cutdown? We'll go with Dave first.
One of the tackles.
Okay, Brian.
Artie Burns for a 7th round pick.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Joshua Dobbs.
All good answers.
Yeah, love it.
I mean, they're all warranted. Okay. Flip asked, how many wide receivers does Pittsburgh keep? And do they all suit up on Sunday? If not, who sits? Let's go, Dave.
They keep 6. They dress 5. Do not be surprised if Deontay Johnson is the one who sits out at the beginning of the season. They did the same thing with Martavis Bryant, and occasionally some with James Washington. I don't know about if we were supposed to get into who the 6 would be, so I'll leave that for someone else.
Okay, Brian.
Let's go back to the last question. Maybe Eli Rogers gets traded at the end. I just don't think that he is sticking in this team. I still think they keep 6, but I'm not. I think that 6th guy is Eli.
I think they keep 6, dress 5. I agree with Dave that Deontay Johnson could sit early, and then depending on injuries, health, performance, it could be someone else later down the road. Next question. Will the Steelers win any games in the Pacific time zone in 2019? Brian, go with you first.
Is Arizona Mountain Time Zone?
That's
Mountain.
Okay.
So it's San Francisco and Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, I think they're going to win in San Francisco this year. It's early. I really think that they're going to go ahead and finally win there.
Dave?
Yeah, I think they could get 1 out of the 2. But you only got 2 chances. If you're including Arizona, I would say definitely. I think they could get 1 out of those 3. I actually did an article on this last week about that. About their Western woes, and not to necessarily expect the same thing that they struggle out there. So I think they'll get a win, maybe 2, if you include Arizona.
I think they beat San Francisco, so I think they at least win 1. All right, next question. How do you feel about the depth on both the Steelers' offense and defensive lines? Let's start with Brian.
I think the offensive line depth is great. It just depends who sticks. I mean, we might see a guy like Derwin Gray make that team, and I think that he could be something in the future. We have guys like Chooks, Filer, Hawkins. They're fighting for that right tackle position. So good depth there. On the defensive line, Tyson Alualu adds depth. I think Isaiah Buggs makes this team, so I'm fine with both lines.
Dave?
Like them both. If anything, you almost have an excess on offense. barring no injuries like they had last year.
All right, so last question here. Do you think that giving Ben Roethlisberger all that money in terms of an extension was it was a mistake? That's the way that Claude worded that.
They had to do it. So no, I don't think it was a mistake. The window is still open. Ben is the leader of this team. They're going to go with him. They're not going to be going with a guy like Dobbs. They're not going to be going with I almost said Landry Jones, and you guys would have roasted me on that. They're not going with Mason Rudolph right now this year. If they're going to go far in the playoffs, it's going to be because of Ben, and Ben needed to get paid one last time.
Dave?
Yeah, they had to give Ben his money. He's the best chance we have to get into the touchdown zone.
Oh, you stole it. You stole it. I was going to say something about the touchdown zone there. All right, that's a good segue into our either or segment coming up. So what we do here at the end of the show is we'll ask each other. Sometimes it's a Steelers related question. Sometimes it's not a Steelers related question. Sometimes it's either or, sometimes it's not. It's a little fun segment we do. I know Dave already has one set up. He said it's quick, and it might be touchdown zone related. We're not sure. Go ahead, Dave. What's your either or for the night?
I had no idea that we were going to get a touchdown zone reference to prepare the either or for that. So mine was simple. I was trying to think of it while I was eating dinner, and I had wings for dinner tonight. So it's very simple: ranch or blue cheese.
Ooh, are the wings spicy or are they just regular wings?
They are your choice, whatever you would prefer to get when you get wings. Or
If
do you
I'm-
vary it all the
It
time?
varies. If I'm going spicy wings, I like blue cheese. If I like just regular wings, I'll take the ranch. That's my take. You might say I'm getting out of it, but that's what I'll say. Bryan?
Blue cheese makes me vomit. I would lick ranch off of a hobo's foot.
Does it have to be a hobo?
I mean, Elvis ate food off of prostitutes, so I mean, I didn't want to go there.
Oh my gosh.
Oh
Okay,
my.
Dave.
Okay, well then I'm just going to answer. Ranch makes everything better. So even fries, like that's my condiment of choice for fries, is ranch.
All right.
Mine too.
Okay, I have a football related one here, and it's not an either or, it's more of an open-ended question. We've talked about announcers on this show before, and we all really enjoy talking about different announcers, and we talked about Pittsburgh announcers from Bill Hoger to Mike Lang. There are announcers that absolutely make me just so angry. I can't stand them. It can be a color commentator or it could be a play-by-play. Who is the one announcer that you hate the most? And I know hate's a strong word, but we're using it in relative terms here. But is there one guy that you say, oh, I cannot stand it? When you look at the distribution map, when the Steelers game comes out, you're like, oh my gosh, the Steelers are stuck with blank. Who is that guy? We'll start with Bryan.
I have hatred for Phil Simms. When Tony Romo took that job over, I was elated. I'm one of the rare people that love Chris Collinsworth, and I hate Phil Simms.
Okay.
Nothing he says pleases me.
What about you there, Dave?
I'm really struggling to think because there's so many of them that I don't like. My dad always disagreed with me with this one. I couldn't stand Dan Deerdorf. He would he would just say some things. It's like, now that was a football play. I'm like, seriously, they weren't playing soccer. So it wasn't baseball. Oh my goodness. He would just say stuff that I was like, it was like he was just saying words just to fill space. And I'm like, there really wasn't much value behind what he was saying. So I'll go with that one.
For color, it was Phil Simms because I like what Bryan said. I always felt he hated the Steelers, and there are some guys you can just tell they have a real strong bias against certain teams, and whatever was going on, he would always be pumping up the other day. I'm not as on as some people are so into Tony Romo. Oh my gosh, he's so great. Sometimes I wish he would just shut up and let me watch the game. I don't need you to predict every single play. If it's a TV timeout and you're coming back, you could talk about how in this package, the Steelers would be looking to go into 12 personnel because that's fine. But let me just watch the game. I I really don't like Joe Buck in anything. When Joe Buck tries to do golf, I want to punch someone in the head. He's awful at it. I think he's best with baseball, but football, Troy Aikman, I think saves him a lot of time because he doesn't know that much. And so I guess, I don't mind Chris Collinsworth. I think Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth are the best out there.
Love him.
I love Jim Nance and everything that he does. A lot of people, someone said in here in the live chat that they don't like, they didn't like Jim Nance. I love Jim Nance. But
I do too.
what about Madden? Did you guys like Madden when he was on?
Well, Madden did not like the Steelers. You can tell that. But yeah, I got tired of Madden at the end, but I didn't have much dislike for him. Real quick, you mentioned Buck. He's the Nickelback of announcers, if you ask me.
He got the hair plugs too. That's what makes it even worse. When he took time off, and everyone thought it was because of a throat issue, and he's got hair plugs instead. That's why he was on here. Okay, so that's mine. That was it. I'm just curious about that type of stuff. So, all right, Brian, take us to the touchdown zone.
Okay, so there was a prediction from let me go back to some articles that happened on Behind the Steel Curtain this week, and I want to give props to you and
Simon.
Should I just mess up your names? I was going to say Jeff Hartman and Simone Chisholm. So Simon Chester and Jeff, they were doing the prediction articles, and one of their articles was, I believe it was Simon's, that the Steelers will pick up 2 players after training camp that aren't on the roster there, at least 2. And so I was thinking about that. So if the Steelers go ahead and go into the fictional world and go ahead and pick up 2 from sports movies, and we love talking about sports movies here. So do the Steelers go with kick returner out of the University of Alabama, Forrest Gump, or would they go with Arizona State wide receiver and Arizona Cardinal Rod Tidwell from Jerry Maguire?
I'll go ahead and go first here.
Oh, you stink.
I'm gonna go with Rod Tidwell because the kickoff is basically being eliminated from the game of football. So I think that would limit Forrest Gump's impact on the game itself. Rod Tidwell, he's a big ego, but he brings it on the biggest stages. We saw him on Monday Night Football. That's what got him the money. So that's who I'll take. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Although, once again, to use Bryan's term, everything's kumbaya with the Steelers in the locker room. I don't know that Tidwell would keep with the kumbaya motif, but you can't argue the on-field production and putting his body on the line to go across the middle and make that reception and make miracles happen.
That's right.
And you know what, real quick, I know he's not fictional, but he is from a sports movie. I know who Jeff would have loved to have picked. That's why I didn't put him in. He was picking Booby Miles.
Oh, you want to win, put Booby in. That's what you do. Shoot, I could have given you give me Jonathan Moxon as a backup quarterback coming off the bench. And he'll go.
I'm going. We've had this before. I'm going Shane Falco over Moxon.
Oh my gosh, Shane Falco was the worst. I'll take Adam Sandler. I'll take Adam Sandler in the longest yard over Falco.
What team did Paul Crewe play for?
That was the Steelers.
Prison. Yes, exactly.
What about Bobby Boucher? What does he fit in this?
Oh, Bobby Boucher! You put him in linebacker. Oh wow! You don't need to trade up for Devin Bush. You've got Bobby Boucher.
Yeah.
Put me in, coach.
Brian's not. I don't think he's watching the live chat right now, but because it was a super chat, we've got to mention this.
Yes. I was gonna say it anyway. Okay. Crazy Chris, who listens to all our shows and follows, he says that we should make touchdown zone T-shirts. I think we need a slogan though. It can't just say touchdown zone. Like it's got to be something catchy. I don't know. It's just
take it to the touchdown zone, baby.
The best is you've been said. Is that a slogan?
Hey, I have no excuses.
What'd you say your wife called the kickoff again?
The cool running up thing.
The cool running up thing.
Yeah.
You got to do the cool running up thing and kick the ball into the touchdown zone.
Yeah, the Davis is here. We're football savants.
I can't say anything that would end it better than that. So I'm gonna get to work on the touchdown zone. Someone said hashtag TDZSZ.
Hey, I'll wear it. I'll rep it. I mean, I'll take those royalties.
I love it. I heart touchdowns in. That's what it should say in black and gold. I heart touchdowns in. It's kind of a little too inside. We'll work on it. We'll get it good. Okay, so next week I'm not going to be here. I'm going on vacation next week. I'm not doing any podcasts. If you want to hear from me, you'll have to check out the written word at behindthesteelcurtain.com. You guys going to bring Tony on next week, or is it just going to be you two?
Hey, we haven't. Tony will do anything. Yeah, I'll talk to Tony. That sounds good. That'll be good because the week after that I'm in the woods. So.
Literally. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's fine. So we'll make it work. So appreciate everyone for following along on the live chat. Make sure you check us out on our audio platforms. We're having issues with Google Play right now, but they're still find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and all those other venues and platforms. Check us out there. We will see you next week, or they will, on another episode of the Steelers Preview.